Welcome everyone. My name is Rande Howell with Trader's State of Mind, and we are here to really look at trading as a journey. And what we're hoping is that on that journey you have prepared yourself well. You know the mechanics of trading. You know the knowledge of trading to a point where you should be able to manage simulation well. You can make profits in simulation, but something happens. When you go to live trading, somehow something happens and suddenly all that knowledge, all those mechanics that you know about trading just seem to be washed out the window. We're going to learn why. We're going to look at this fear of the unknown, where it comes from and what it's about and what you can do about it to really move to another level in your trading. But first, a little bit of house cleaning. First, I'd like to thank Eric Spiker. That's with Job Bracket Breakout. I thank you. This is basically his people that we've contacted here, and that's who's here. And he will be on my website. He will be doing a presentation for my people Saturday morning. So what I want to do, I want to go in and just simply say that, okay, here's the deal. The one obstacle that stands between you and creating an effective mind for trading is this. You have to be able to learn to be able to recognize and really acknowledge and decide you're going to do something about the fear of the unknown. Now, you may be a big, tough guy. I don't know. But what I'll say is this, is that you will be able to see whether or not the fear of the unknown is actually in and part of your trading by looking at your trading account. Okay? If you start noticing that you have problems in performance when you have to manage uncertainty and you can't force outcome, then the fear of the unknown is there. Whether or not you like it or not, the only thing is, what are you going to do about it? So now we know that there's an inherent fear of the unknown, and it's bred into everyone. It's built into all social mammalians, and we're always trying to organize pattern to be able to master outcome. But the problem is we can't really in trading. We may be able to do it in other domains of our lives. It's very common for people to have been able to be very successful in other endeavors, and then they come into trading and it just doesn't work. All the success skills that they had back then simply don't work now. And here's the deal, is your biology and your psychology is playing against you. Your biology evolved literally to avoid the unknown. The unknown was dangerous. Okay, literally, when our ancestors on the African Serengeti and we were looking across the savannas, we would look at bushes, and because we were little critters, and we weren't big, we weren't strong, we weren't fast, we learned to assume that there was a saber-toothed cat behind every bush, when in fact there was only 1 in 10,000. But what that did is it allowed us to fear the unknown, and now that fear of that unknown, it allowed us a super skill to build a species. And here it is. Millions of years later, it's now in the modern man, in the old brain, and it creates our psychology. And if you don't believe that, take a look at the way you trade. If you hesitate at entry, or if you go bananas managing a trade bouncing around on you, you have experienced this phenomenon. So now, it was enormously successful in the past, both on a biological level and a psychological level, but it's not now. And this is what keeps us stuck. It's been so successful that it doesn't want to let go of you. And what most traders do is they are lulled into complacency. They may see the dollars just chinging up that they're losing, but they just put it off, because, the fear of the unknown, it could be worse. Then finally, the loss gets so staggering that they finally have to do something about it. The problem there is usually it's too late. You've already compromised your financial resources and you can't become the trader anymore. You're going to have to find something else. So understand this is the short-term solution for this avoidance of the unknown. It's very simple. You fear, and what happens is you learn how to control what really can't be controlled. We have this idea that we can either control stuff like the alpha wants to control outcome by sheer will, by sheer force. I am going to make things happen. And those are the guy that blows up accounts when they get into trading because they're still trying to control. They're trying to control outcome. And they don't recognize that the control of outcome is an illusion in trading. I would actually say in life too, but the speed of trading makes it so apparent, so quick, that you can't get away with anything. You can't live in the delusion that you can control outcome in trading. In other forms of life, you can. The other form, outside of controlling outcome by willpower, alpha, there is also the perfectionist who tries to control outcome by not making mistakes or being right. This also has been a great formula, but you can see that it's all fear-based. Fear has, and what you're doing is you're using control about not experiencing fear. And again, what is this fear? This fear is the fear of the unknown. What might happen? Okay? When you begin to see that, you're going, okay, I know now that I had a very successful solution for the management of the unknown, the fear of the unknown, and either my alphaness, being really wanting to control outcome, or in my perfectionism, where I was trying to control outcome by not making mistakes. Okay, different ways of doing it, not making a mistake versus willpower, force. But the thing is, what you discover is that your whole trading philosophy is built around fear. And when you start projecting fear onto the markets, guess what happens? Boom, that's what happens. Now, ultimately, what you have to grasp in trading is this, is that your personal power, either by not making mistakes, controlling that way, or by willpower, absolutely means nothing in the markets, in the world of trading. And this is a really great quote. People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. You know, all that losing you do in trading? Out of a fear of the unknown, oh God, what could happen? You know, I might be losing now, but you know, if I change things, if I did something, I might be losing more. They prefer suffering that is familiar. And that's what I see in trading all the time is I will see this literally hundreds of times a year. People will talk to me and say, Randy, I really wish I'd listened. I really, you know, I kept hearing this stuff is that trading really is a head game, that once you got your fundamentals down, but I didn't believe them. I kept thinking that, you know, I'm going to learn some trick, I'm going to learn something, and finally I'm going to turn the corner and I'm going to start making money, and then I'm going to use you, okay, and it's like crazy. What you will see is that they will have lost anywhere from $20, $30, $40, $50,000 to $500,000 to millions of dollars, and they finally have been very humbled, and they have been shook out of their complacency. The problem, though, is the cost of them learning to become a trader has been so high that it's difficult for them to become the trader they now see they have to be. Because ultimately, once you get the fundamentals down, trading is a head game. And there is a need to transform the mind that is attempting to control outcome to a mind that can embrace probability, the unknown. Okay, completely different animals. One you're born with and adapt with. The other you're going to have to create. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be lucky. And you're not going to learn it by more knowledge. You're going to learn it through emotional intelligence. You're going to learn how to manage emotion and to get at the very core beliefs you have about your ability to manage uncertainty. That is what's being reflected in your trading account. That ultimately is what has to be faced and changed. Until you do it, it's not going to happen. What's required to do it? Fundamentally, it's interior courage. And I like to use Nelson Mandela as this because, you know, he faced one of the most awful things that I think a human being can experience. He got put in a 6x9 cell in solitary confinement for a period of 3 years where the Afrikaners intended to break him, and they knew they could. But somehow in this situation he found himself in, he awoke to interior courage, and out of that he discovered that he was master of his own destiny. Okay? It took that extreme example for him to turn it around. I don't believe that we have to have that extreme of example, but we do have to have the interior courage to break out of our complacency, to break out of that thing where we're being hypnotized, we're in trance, we watch the dollars coming out of our account, they're disappearing and they're disappearing. Oh, well, I only lost $20,000 last year. I only lost $10,000. I only lost $80,000 last year. I only lost $100,000. And it'll go on for year after year after year. And about 5 or 10 years into this thing, you realize, wow, where's all this money going from? I'm waking up and all of a sudden I look at my trading account, I look at my capacity to put more money into trading, and all of a sudden it's gone. This is the time. This is too late to wake up. I'm asking you to recognize up front, to smell the situation and say, you know something, I realize I have the human tendency to complacency and not acting. But if I really want to become a trader, man, I have to wake up. I have to find the courage to face my fears. Not later, now. The truth is, you have never been able to control outcome. Never. But your biology and your mind is built to deceive you into believing that you can. And to do that, what happens is that this is one of the hardest things, and I consider it the hardest moment in trading, is this actually waking up and becoming self-honest with yourself and admitting what you're doing is not working and admitting it early enough that you can take corrective action. Okay? Early enough to take corrective action. I will hear people say, Randy, I wish I had woken up early enough when I actually had the money to be able to work with you. But it's too late now. And I have deep compassion for these people. But the thing is that this game, trading, it's a terrible mistress if you're not awake. If you're awake, it becomes an enormously successful way of extracting capital out of the markets from other people who have not woken up. And we have to open ourselves to change, and we have to really find courage inside us, not as bravado. Okay? And eventually, we come to a moment where we realize that we have to face our vulnerabilities, and we have to become fully alive in an uncertain world. That's the difficulty between the old brain built to try to control outcome and the new brain that you need in trading that manages probability, is that the new brain knows that you're vulnerable. And it knows that it's uncertain. But if you manage your performance, what you do is you know you have a real edge and that you are going to be okay. You're going to make money. If your trading account is telling you the opposite, it is telling you, if you're basically being shown stagnancy or leaving a lot of money on the table or losses, what it's showing you is the beliefs that you're holding about your ability to manage uncertainty are not cutting the mustard. You're going to have to come to a moment of where you have to look at the belief structure and decide, do I have the belief structure to be able to manage risk? Because I have to build a new norm, and I have to be able to be comfortable with risk, not triggering, okay? And this is the big, huge thing that separates winners from losers in trading, is deterministic thinking versus being able to have probability-based thinking. In deterministic thinking, you really, truly are trying to control outcome. Practically every newbie, every novice, and many experienced traders who are still kind of adequate traders, but they haven't become experts where they've really found the ability to really make money in the markets. What happens is they're still trying to control outcome. They're still trying to predict the outcome. What they haven't come to yet is the understanding that they cannot control outcome, but what they can control the only thing they control, is the mind that they bring into the moment of their performance. Friends, that's a big deal right there. Because ultimately, when you realize that sitting around allowing the biology that you have to just absolutely blow up your capital is nuts. To allow the psychology that you brought into trading to blow up your account is nuts. And you look at it sooner and you say, I know that I have to train my mind to manage probability. I know that that's not the mind that I brought to trading. I know that that's the mind that is necessary for actually winning consistently in trading, and I have to develop it. It's not going to fall off the tree into my hands like the apple did onto Newton's head. You are going to have to develop the capacity to manage probability. And we know that literally what happens is that just like a pearl starts out as an irritation, okay, what happens is that as you develop your capacities, and what happens is that you're turning toward your vulnerabilities, you're turning toward your, basically your fears, and you're letting them be your teacher. And out of that, what happens is that you are built into the pearl of a trader. You find the deep inward stuff, but you have to be willing to face it, okay? Ultimately, you discover very quickly that your mind is a product of your biology, okay? And you're going to have to overcome the tendencies of that biology to avoid threat, okay, and to literally try to control outcome. And it may work on a macro level, but it doesn't happen on a quantum level, which you're working with in trading. This is where it's at. Then you go, well, okay, Randy, this sounds really good, but how do I start doing this? First, once you grasp this, is that what is the mind? This is where most people don't grasp or have a good working model of a mind that allows them to actually work with it. In neuroscience, what we understand is the brain is a community of rival programs that has organized you based on circumstance, based on nature, based on nurture to survive in a particular environment. That's it, folks. And if you take that organism out of the environment that it adapted to, it will continue to create the circumstances of survival. That's why women keep marrying the same alcoholic guy over and over and over again. It's also why you keep doing the same stupid things over and over again in trading that keep you from the elevated levels of effective trading that you could be. Now, when that brain becomes mind, this is where it gets really interesting. The mind, in the brain, the activity, the behavior of the brain is neural activity, electrical activity. The language of mind are your thoughts. Suddenly these programs that are in cahoots to organize the organism in a particular way that you call I suddenly become thoughts and voices, and suddenly what you have is you have a committee that is composed of different forces, some very destructive, all that blowing up and sabotage that you do, and some very constructive when those times you actually do have this discipline and partiality. And all of a sudden you're realizing, wow, I need to wake up to the organization of this committee of the mind, because apparently it's absolutely in disarray. And somebody, somehow, I have to get control of that. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to say, well, who is this I that trades? How does it work? First of all, there's an observer of phenomenon. Okay? That observer has a certain set of beliefs. Okay? Those beliefs produce a certain kind of thinking based on circumstance. Another way of saying this is that you have never experienced the markets. You have never seen information that describes absolutely the markets. What you have is a brain who has taken sensorial data from your sensorial modalities and has created a virtual simulation of the world that he's in based on your beliefs about the ability to manage uncertainty. Friends, that's what you're projecting onto the markets. That's why you can have two traders side by side using the same machine, same methodology, looking at the same feeds, having all the same information, and the results are completely different. What they have is they have a different set of beliefs that create a visual representation. But one of them, better one, knows that his is not true. He just has a more accurate representation that produces more effectiveness at the bottom line time. That's all. The other one has a belief about, oh my God, what bad things can happen, and he finds bad things that can happen. Or he may say, I have to prove myself. I'm ready to get in there and trade. You have to be trading to trade. And all of a sudden he's a compulsive gambler. Okay? The other one who believes, well, if I'm very highly disciplined and impartial and very patient, I'm going to have setups that come along that give me a very good chance of winning money. And if I keep doing this, I will win money. Different virtual simulations based on belief. This is what we're looking for. This is the trading mind. And you realize that it becomes very much about emotional nature. The emotions of the brain bring forth the mind that's perceiving, and the beliefs create the thinking, the perception that you have. This is what has to be managed. This is what you want to move from deterministic thinking to probability thinking. And the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start controlling the emotional reactivity that you're having when things start happening that trigger you, okay? All emotion, okay? First of all, understand this. To neuroscience, an emotion is any disruption to a standard sensorial pattern that the brain has already established. It is not psychological. It is not happening in the mind. It's happening in the body. And it is creating the mind that interacts with the environment, usually from fear, okay? And what you're having to do is get control of that, okay? And the good news is this, is that it can be controlled before it becomes a wreck. The emotion, because it's biological, has two components that you can really work with, breath and muscle tension. Breath is directly tied to the kind of emotion that can be maintained. For instance, fear requires holding breath, or it requires this rapid high breathing where you're cutting off oxygen supply to brain and you're moving the oxygen supply to big muscles ready to flee. Okay? Anger requires also holding breath, cutting off oxygen supply to brain, and moving oxygen reserves into the big muscles ready to fight the threat. You see, the interpretation of the information is from a threat standpoint, not from an opportunistic probability standpoint. Then in tension, you find the tension is part of the emotion too. And as long as you hold the tension, and I actually videotape traders as part of my training, and usually it's embarrassing to them the first time they see when they actually see themselves on videotape what they're doing. They are just hunched up. They are just tension balls. They're sitting there tapping their pencils. Their legs are just frailing up and down. They're doing all that stuff. What that is arousal. And if they don't catch it real soon, that arousal is not just revving up the emotion. Very soon, the chemistry of that emotion is going to be flooding through the body. The cortisol, or the dopamine and testosterone of grandiose thinking, is going to end up, and you're going to end up in the bloodstream, and suddenly your thinking is going to be so contaminated you're impossibly not able to trade. You've seen that in hesitation. You've seen that in freaking out. That the moment that you get a little bit of green, that you take the profits early, and you never wait for the target to be hit. You see it all the time. The whale at J.P. Morgan evaporated $2 billion based on his grandiosity, but his testosterone and his dopamine got so high that he was euphoric. They even tested him and found out that he was incapable of rational trader thinking. But when asked how he felt, he said, I'm not even in emotion. What are you talking about? And yet there the neuroscientists were saying, no, he's compromised beyond belief. That's what's happening right underneath your nose. And unless you learn to catch it, you can't get it. The first place where you control it is through breath and through tension. What you do is you learn to observe your body, you observe the way you breathe, and you begin to have control over it. Diaphragmatic breathing, what it does, diaphragmatic breathing stops the ability of an emotion, of an aggressive motion, to take hold and to grow. You can actually control the intensity of the emotion by breath and tension. Boom. Let's say, so there you get there, okay? There you can watch it, you can control it. And because the emotion is grounded in the body, you can manage it. It's amazing. It's the first skill that I teach in my training. And people are walking away going, oh my God, I had no idea. This is, it's like, I had no idea. But the thing is, the breathing and the tension reduction has to be trained in the environment that you're going to be using it in. A lot of people take relaxation of yoga and stuff like that, and they say, I can't use it in trading. They aren't trained to use it in trading, and that has to happen. But now, let's say that you finally get the emotions calm, where you can really get them and they're not just absolutely sweeping away. With the emotion calm, the door of the mind can be approached, okay? Inside that mind is where you're going to find all the self-limiting beliefs that are holding your trading hostage. We need to develop a skill. And by the way, emotional regulation by itself is not going to solve the problem, okay? However, if you cannot emotionally regulate yourself, you're never going to get to being able to work with the mind. The emotions are going to sweep mind away long before you get to it. But with them controlled, you get to the moment where you're going, okay, now we can look into the mind. And what we do is I teach mindfulness as a way of going an observer of the self. And what you discover is this, is that you and your thoughts are not the same. There is awareness that sits outside of thought and belief, and you can step back out of them and you can watch them, and all of a sudden you begin to go, oh my God, I was born into a history, okay? It was kind of like a soup. I just got blended into it, and somewhere along the line this I showed up, and I thought I was fearful. I thought I was this. No, what happens is these are beliefs and thoughts that were historical in nature. I inherited them from my culture, my parents, from circumstances, and they just locked in, became habituated, and those assumptions became facts. They became beliefs that started driving my ability to create the reality I'm in. And the thing about trading is your sense of reality is going to be severely tested. Okay? Your sense of historical, how history organized you into an observer is going to be tested. So this is part of it. I'm going to tell you, it is literally part of your humanness. I teach it as a way of, I teach you how to step back, observe, and I begin to give you plenty of examples of actually your experience. You will have experienced mindfulness. You will have experienced the observer waking and watching, and that you can kind of step back like on a tree limb and look down at yourself. When you do that, very powerful things happen. You start looking, and I start giving you a structure of the mind so that you know what you're looking at. You have a going, okay, I know that I'm going to be looking for certain kinds of thought forms, certain kinds of belief systems, and I know that basically what's happening is these emotional programs in the brain now have been given a life as thought, and I'm beginning to look at the thought, to observe it, and go back down to the program and discover what programs are running the show. And unfortunately, in the mind, in life, the Chinese nailed it really well. There's a yin-yang. There is enormous destructive qualities of life. There's enormous constructive qualities of life. And if you're going to blind the observer to the destructiveness of life, then it has sway over you. And look at your trading success, and you will see if you're a positive thinker and you're not acknowledging the destructiveness, it will just bowl you over. If you're a thinker where you realize that it's not really about positive and negative, it's about building the mind that can trade in probabilities. What I'm looking for is that destructiveness. I know it's there. And where you look is right here. Go back. what you do is you actually look for the historical dialogue, and what you will discover is what I call an inner critic. That's the destructiveness. That's the judge. That's the part that criticizes you. That's the part that tempts you. That's the one that has you doing all sorts of stupid things. And unfortunately, you actually believe it has power, but the only power that that part of the mind has is the power you give it. The other part that you begin to find is your fear. And I call it, from a Jungian archetypal perspective, I call that fear your orphan nature. And it wants security, it wants all the outcome, it wants all that. And the truth is trading's not going to give it. Okay, you cannot control your environment the way you could in the physical environment. And what you're beginning to do is you're beginning to see this gigantic internal struggle that you have absolutely done everything you can to ignore. And what happens is that it is blowing up your trading account. It is limiting your possibility as a trader. So the first thing you observe with this newfound skill of observation is this historical dialogue between the inner critic and this fear-based part of yourself that I call orphan. It's actually, in psychology, we call it the adapted self, but I found that using the word orphan really zeroes in on the fear-based part of it. And it's actually, anatomically, it would be called the amygdala. Okay? Now, this is where it gets interesting, because once you grasp this, you go, oh my God, I don't want to roll around in this misery forever. No, you don't. What happens is you realize, no, that's where you're stuck. And this is giving you a handle on the way you're stuck so you can do something about it. From there, what we do is we're going to free the mind to manage uncertainty and probability. What we're going to do, through this observing self, you learn to reconstruct the beliefs, to reconstruct the parts of the mind, this committee of the mind. You teach it to, you find these inherent strengths, because ultimately what you discover is this, is that these inherent emotional programs in the brain, okay, what happens is they can take on good forms or bad forms depending on circumstance. And what you're looking to do is saying, you know something, I know that I probably have pushed away some of these things, and I don't have access to the heroic nature of this. And ultimately, I'm probably, every one of you has probably used affirmations, you've used visualizations, probably tapping, probably this hemispheric stuff of mind balancing, all sorts of different things, and you discover under pressure it doesn't work. It's because it doesn't really understand the way the brain's designed. What you want to do is this. In applied mindfulness, what you're doing is you darn well know that there are emotional programs wired into circuitry for discipline, courage, patience, and impartiality. These are, as part of your DNA, these have been formed over vast time. And the difference, though, is how do you access them so they become active parts of your awareness. What I have found, and my background is that I worked with violent prisoners and at-risk youth and their families for a number of years before I got into self-development stuff. So I have a very different understanding of how to access stuff and how to work with difficult brains. Okay? I use a very different strategy. I actually go into memory, okay, of when you have been challenged and the outcome is uncertain, but you were able to push through to higher ground. And what I do is I know that the brain has encoded that experience into a particular memory according to history. And what I know is that most likely the person never has encoded the memory in such a way that allows them to get at these heroic emotional programs that you need for probability thinking. It just so happens I found a way to do that through a process called memory restructuring, where you go in and you actually find these elements within the memory and you awaken them and you realize, well, darn, they were there. They had to be there. You know, the discipline, the courage, the patience, the impartiality had to be there, or I would have never been able to get through the experience. Okay? Never. So you know they're there. It's not something you're trying to make believe. It's not trying to fake it till you make it. It's not something that you're wishing for. It's something that has in fact already occurred. It is factual. It is in your experience. And all we're doing is we're teaching you how to duplicate that experience, hold it, and bring that into the trading world. Completely different. To do that, you're going to have to challenge your fears. Okay? You're going to come down to a baseline of finding a deeper sense of worth than your self-worth. You're going to find inherent worth so that when you're trading, performance is only a performance. The performance is not an indication of your value as a human being. Frees you up. But there again, you also find access to discipline, courage, self-soothing, impartiality. Those are the big four. When you have those, you can produce a very stable mind for the management of uncertainty. That's when you are pulling together as a team. Suddenly the mind is not based on fear. It's not based on temptation. It's not based on euphoria. The mind is based on biology, deeply rooted in discipline and impartiality. Fear is calmed down by self-soothing. The inner critic, all this critical nature, is confronted by this courage of a warrior aspect to yourself. And what's left to manage the probabilities and possibilities in a trading setup is this deep sense of discipline of a ruler and this deep sense of impartiality of a stage. That's the trading mind. And when you get it, and that's a very trainable situation. I see people doing it all the time. When you get that, you become the master of the self that trades. Okay? What you've done here is this. You have moved away from a mind who is trying to control outcome, which was impossible in the first place. Okay? What you have is a mind that can control the one thing that it can control. It can control the mind that you bring into the moment of performance. That's all the difference in the world. I want to give you an illustration of that. A couple years ago, I'm watching Olympics track and field, and there's this American sprinter, hurdler actually, and they're talking about him. They're giving him all this, this the greatest thing since cream cheese. He's just the best. He's going to win, and blah blah blah. All this stuff, and what he is an athlete among athletes, and he's getting down. You can see all these guys. These guys have gone through 10, 15 years worth of training for this event, for this 10, 15 seconds that they're about to have. And what you see is that the gun goes off and they just hurl down the hurdles. And the American just catches fire and he does win the race. And all the time the announcer's saying, what's he thinking? Look at him go. Everybody knew he was going to do this. This is a done deal. He's got the goal. He's probably set a world's record. Yeah. At the end of the race, this athlete sitting at the end of the thing, and he's doing what all athletes do after doing all that stuff. He's huffing and puffing, trying to get his air back. The journalists come up to him, and they stick microphones in his face. And they say, what was it like? What was it like when you knew you were going to win? What were you thinking? And he's looking at him with this look in his face. And the guy said, you want to know what I was thinking when I was racing? Yes, the world wants to know. What was it like when you had the glory? What you knew you had gold, that you knew you were going to do that. What was that like? The world wants to know, wants to share with you that powerful feeling. He says, wait a minute, you want to know what I was thinking? And he says, well, I'll tell you, okay. Yes, yeah. And he says, here's what I was thinking. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this guy, no doubt that a trading coach had been working with this guy for years and years and years, and that 1, 2, 3, 4 was a way, a mnemonic for him to be able to coordinate muscle action and performance all the way down. No doubt about it. Each one of those things meant something. There's no doubt that a sports psychologist had worked with this athlete and had used 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 as a way of maintaining peak mind for performance. No doubt about it. The key is what I want you to hear is while the trader is in the act of performing, his mind is right there in performance of execution. It's not out there in the future where the gold is. It's not in the past of all the glory. It's right here in the very moment of performance, the one thing he can control. And if he does control the mind that he brings to performance, then your methodology okay, that statistically has an edge in the markets, is able to deliver that edge because you've got your head screwed on right. You're no longer in the future. You're no longer in the past. You're no longer absorbed by your P&L statement blinking over there in your screen. You're there in the moment and realizing, you know, something, win or lose, the truth is the only thing I can control is my performance. And what I know is that probability will be on my side. I will get more winners than losers, and my losers will be smaller than my winners. That's pretty much what an expert thinker thinks. He's here in the moment. And what he knows he can control is the one thing he can. He's the master of the self that trades. He's not a master of outcome. He's a master of himself in the trade. Do you see the difference? Big deal. Okay? So let's take a look at this. If you want to reconstruct the mind to produce expert trading, over on the left, you're looking at what you brought to trading. Okay? No new trinket, no more new knowledge is going to change and shift that. You know, basically what happens is that unless you expand the mind, unless you really take a look at going, what beliefs am I really doing and what am I going to do about those beliefs that are limiting me, you're going to end up mindlessly trading. And you're going to be doing the same stupid things tomorrow, the next day, 5 years from now that you're doing right now. That's the pattern. And that's that thing about suffering. It becomes really familiar, and you're very familiar with the suffering that you are, but if you change, oh my God, what might happen? And the thing is you have to change if you're going to be a successful trader. On the right side, you're looking at, first, an emotional, regulated, calm, focused mindset, one that really, truly understands how to use emotions. They're not free from emotions, but the trader has learned how to use emotions to build a particular mind where there's this committee. And the mind is going, okay, I'm going to figure out which emotions I want present to create the mind that can trade in probabilities. That's something that can be learned. Isn't that amazing? All it takes is a person willing to change, willing to go, I have to change the mind that performs rather than trying to find an alibi that can buy me luck. Okay? That's it. On the right, you see the trader's state of mind. You see the experts. And on the left, what you're seeing is you're seeing who the experts are taking money from. So tell me something. How do you become the change? Here's the deal, folks. The people I work with have been usually trading for a while. I'm looking for traders who can know what they're doing. Fundamentally, they know what they're doing, but they're having problems in performance somewhere. If it's an expert trader, usually it's they're leaving too much money on the table, and the company's saying, no, you need to be producing more money out of your trades. That's what the problem is. With novice, beginner, and even fairly experienced traders, it's at entry. You know, oh my God, what if I'm wrong? It's managing all that, and it's also managing the trade once you get in it, so that you're managing it from a state of discipline and impartiality rather than fear. Oh my God, what if the money's taken away from me? Scarcity thinking. If you've come to that, first of all, I invite everybody to get my free ebook. Okay, it's the one when you go to my website, it's the first thing you see. It's a compilation of a number of articles I've written over the number of years, 160 pages of excellent psychological understanding of trading. Get it, it's free. The first thing is explore on my website all the free stuff. I've got articles and videos posted there, you know, more than your hours and hours of stuff on there, okay, for you to learn cognitively and kind of get a feel for what's going on. But if you're at a place where you're going, you know, I need to do something. I actually need to do something. I need to do something. Get my book, Mindful Trading. And what it does is it takes literally traders as bulls in the china shop who don't understand why they're blowing things up, and it shows you their evolution into expert traders. It's a powerful book, good read, and I recommend it. But if you go from there and you're saying, you know, I really need to do something, Randy. I can't go ahead. I can't keep on keeping on this way. I'm blowing money out. It's not happening. I'm leaving so much money on the table that, how long can I go on to do that? If you're doing that, my invitation to you is come to our group course that starts later this month. It is a powerful course. It's a group course that meets 5 times as a group. And what you're doing is you have 24/7 access to a virtual classroom that teaches all the skills that I've just talked about. Okay? And it's, by most people's standards, it's called the most cost-effective training course they've seen for psychological development. And if you sign up right now, you get a free, basically it's a webinar that I did on emotional regulation that is very powerful. It gives you a good heads up. It's a 2-hour video that really teaches you that. You get it free. If you order it on my website, it's $200, but you get it free for signing up early. I want you to sign up early so that you're prepared for the first day, because I'm assuming the first day that you come to class, you've done your homework, because I'm going to hit the ground running, and I'm expecting you to do the same thing with me. It's a powerful course, friends. It teaches all the basic skills from emotional regulation to mindfulness to applied mindfulness, of where you are able to reorganize the committee of the mind to become an effective trader. Powerful. And I would encourage you to, that's the big one, okay? Total cost, $11.95, can be broken down into 5 payments of $239. Very, very reachable for almost anybody, okay? And that's, by the way, why it's there that way. I was told by trader trainers, Randy, we need something that our people can afford, and that's it. But if you want to go further, if you really want to become the change, I would recommend also the individual course with me. The main thing it has is 10 consults over a period of 3 or 4 months with me. Okay? By Skype, and it's by Skype. I mean, we're literally looking at each other eyeball to eyeball, and it's done with a much different program. It's far more personal. It really gets into this fear business and what organizes that fear and resolving that fear, and it is much more comprehensive. And the materials that you get an enormous multimedia textbook that comes along with it that you're downloading and using, and we go through a curriculum all the way through, and it's like a graduate level course. This is what I would recommend. And what I want to leave you with is this, and I'm going to take your questions, is how much money is it going to take for you to lose or leave on the table for you to recognize that ultimately it's the inner game, it's the head game that's going to make a difference? Is that there's plenty of people who know how to trade, okay? They're a dime a dozen, they teach, they squander money all the time. There are very few people who are productive, effective traders, though. That's because they've invested in getting their head straight. They finally got it and says, I can go ahead and squander money. At the end of the day, though, I'm still going to have to get my head together if I want to trade. If you have the passion, if you're there, what I ask you to do is say, take charge of this development. It's going to be there. The need for development of the psychology of performance is going to be there tomorrow, to a month, a year from now. And it is what is going to be the obstacle for most people to become the trader that can achieve the goals of financial freedom and time freedom they want. Okay? So really, when it comes down to it, how much money do you need to leave on the table? How much money do you need to lose to come to a moment where you go, something, I can't go on in this complacency. I have to break out of it. I have to take action. I actually need to train the mind that trades. I want to thank you very much. I really welcome and thank you for your time today. I really enjoy talking about emotional intelligence applied to trading. And my hope is this, is one, no matter what, my hope is you come away from this knowing a lot more about emotions, mind, and how they interplay with the performance in trading. And if I can help you, I encourage you to take the next step. Go to my website, and if you're really interested, get a consult with me. They're free, but you need to be interested. You need to be really saying, I need to do something about the mind. The consults are free. You just hit contact us, and a time will be found for us to meet. It's usually on Skype. And then I invite you to consider the group course or the individual course, depending on your financial means, as a way of making a commitment to that I am going to develop a mind that can trade. So friends, it has been my pleasure. It has been fun. And I wish you prosperity. Thank you very much. Good night.